I'm Jim Check with KelownaNow. I have with me Philip Davidson from the BCPS. Why don't you tell me what that is? BCPS for freedom for bodily autonomy. I probably got it wrong.
No, it's BCPS Employees for Freedom, or BCPSF, as we call it sometimes.
Okay. Yeah, so what we were just talking prior to going on, one of the hottest talked about videos is the one that the interview that was done with you and John Rustad, and yet nobody in media has reached out and talked to you. Maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, and thanks for reaching out to us, Jim. It is interesting that this video interview with John Rustad has become a focal point for this election campaign and a lot of attacks from the NDP. So we're the BCPS Employees for Freedom. We're a not-for-profit, nonpartisan society that was established in the wake of proof of COVID-19 vaccination mandates that were imposed on the public service in 2021. And this year, we invited all party leaders, including John Rustad and David Eby, Kevin Falcon at the time, and Sonia Furstenau, to come speak with us and speak with our members. So we're a society that stands for medical privacy and bodily autonomy. And we're generally interested in what the leaders of the main political parties are planning for the province, as we all work in public service or have worked in public service in the past. And so we invited all four leaders, and only Mr. Rustad responded to us and agreed to meet with us in an online meeting that we had in June with our members to talk about various issues and answer questions.
How many people in your organization then, in the group there?
Yeah, so we have a pretty broad mailing list, registered members at the moment, about 300. But we know that we have many more across the public service and just the public sector generally. We're engaged in supporting some ongoing litigation right now on behalf of fired public service employees, both unionized and non-unionized. And so there is a class action lawsuit that was filed by one of our members on behalf of all employees who are affected by the proof of vaccination mandates.
And for public service, just for the viewers, public service is not the healthcare workers. It's public services like the people that are working in forestry and different things, right?
Yeah, that's right. People working generally for the provincial government. But we also have members who've worked for other levels of government, municipal or federal government. So anyone who's basically worked in public service in the public sector in British Columbia can become a member of our society. In fact, any British Columbian can become a member, a non-voting member. But if you've worked in public service, you can become a voting member of our society.
How many public service employees were terminated?
So that's an interesting fact that we don't have the exact number. I've seen numbers reported in the media around over 300. And that's a number given, I guess, by the Public Service Agency of BC. But we know there's many more who left the public service, who retired early, and just generally quit when the mandates were imposed. And numbers there can range anywhere from 2 to above 3,000. So there's quite a significant drawdown when the mandates were imposed. And people who are very experienced, too, as well, served many years.
Yeah. And where were you working? What sector were you working in?
So I was working in the post-secondary education sector. I was the Director of Policy and Stakeholder Relations at the Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Training. And my area was overseeing policy for student financial assistance.
Yeah, it seems like I did an interview with somebody else, and a lot of these people were already working from home, yet there was still this need to terminate people. It seemed odd.
Yeah, that was my case. And I was working from home, as was all of my team. For quite some time, from March 2020 onwards, and in the fall of 2021, of course, all the mandates came about, and it became a condition of employment in order to keep your job to show your vaccine passport over your computer screen through MS Teams to your immediate supervisor in order to be able to remain working from home.
That seemed odd, right? Like you're working from home, you're not seeing anybody, and yet you still have to provide proof of vaccine. You're not even, in the office.
Yeah, well, that's what really struck me about the whole thing, and kind of where I, um, um, you know, concluded that this wasn't really about health or safety. It was more of a, um, I don't know what it was exactly, an ideological test or a litmus test. I personally believe very strongly in medical privacy, and so I didn't see any need, if we were working remotely, to disclose that information to our employers. Um, and so I declined to disclose my vaccination status, and have done so publicly since then. I don't think there's really any need to do that, especially if you believe strongly that the vaccine protects you and makes you safe. So if you're not going to be in contact with other people, then I don't see any need to
So
to use a passport.
you were terminated in 2022, or
Yeah, so myself and many hundreds, if not thousands, of other employees were put on leave without pay, unpaid leave with unpaid suspension, basically, from November 2021 onward. We were told we may be terminated um, in 3 months' time or so, but that was stretched out quite a bit longer. In my case, I wasn't terminated until June of 2022. The vaccine passport had already been withdrawn as a requirement to enter certain public spaces by that time. But the BC Public Service remained as a term and condition of employment for another full year until April of 2023.
hmm. And then you've been terminated. Have they offered your job back at all since the vaccine mandate's been lifted?
No, those of us who were terminated for cause. It was alleged that we had committed misconduct by not disclosing our vaccination status to our employers. And so we were denied any reasonable notice, any severance pay, and we were ineligible for employment insurance. And so typically, when you're fired for misconduct, you get a black mark on your employment record, and you're not invited back. It may be
Hmm.
difficult to find employment elsewhere. Um, but strangely, when they lifted the mandate, they said, "Oh well, if you've been fired, you can apply again if you want for a job with the BC Public Service. We're not going to give you a job back, but you can apply again. It's okay." So
Hmm.
I don't really know what to make of that, but I think that's something that'll be sorted out in the years ahead through the ongoing litigation.
So that class action lawsuit is still ongoing.
Yeah. Just for your viewers, there's a member of our society who is a terminated employee of the BC Public Service. He was unionized. The majority of the BC Public Service employees are unionized. They are required to be members of the BC General Employees Union, the BCGEU, one of the largest unions in British Columbia. Um, and he was fired, and so he filed a claim as a representative plaintiff in a class action for all BC Public Service employees, approximately 38,000, who were affected by this mandate, whether they were fired, put on leave without pay, or coerced in one way or another to comply with the mandate. And that action is moving forward, and we expect there to be hearings for certification of that action in April or so of next year.
Yeah, court takes a long time for sure. So this video, you did a video, you invited all the leaders of the four parties, and only John Rustad showed up. And now the NDP has used that as a talking point against John Rustad, I take it.
Yeah, and some of their talking points, they've described us, BCPS Employees for Freedom, as a group of anti-vaxxers. I just want to dispel that notion right away here. We have both vaccinated and so-called unvaccinated members within our society. We're not against vaccines in any way. We believe in medical privacy and bodily autonomy and freedom of choice. And we are against, however, mandates, being coerced to make medical decisions and being punished for not revealing your private medical information and so forth. And so that's what has happened under the previous, or the government now that is seeking re-election, the BC NDP. which is very strange in many ways. It happened all over the world. We saw this no jab, no job policy implemented in many jurisdictions, but in few quite as vigorously and vehemently as in British Columbia. And it strikes me that it's very strange that it be that way because BC is such a strong labor province. Organized labor, the unions are very, very strong and influential in British Columbia. In fact, are a big part of the NDP's political success. But in this case, the unions did absolutely nothing to represent their members, and in fact, worked with the employer to impose these mandates on their own members, essentially failing to represent them.
That's the part
And
that always surprises me is that the unions are there to protect the weakest members always. You think that's their function. I've been part of a union in the past. I was actually a job steward at one point, way a long time ago, but it seems like they've stepped aside or just not really defended the people in a member that's in trouble. And it seems odd because if you look in Alberta, it's a stark contrast of where they've gone now with like they're enacting different laws and different things about that, and they basically came out and apologized as well, and yet there's none of that in British Columbia.
yeah, and I don't know exactly all of the internal dynamics, but it's clear that the unions, the BCGU, in the case of BC Public Service employees, and the BC Federation of Labor, they're all very close with the BC NDP, and so a political decision was taken to impose mandates on employees, and those unions that support the NDP, I think, were loath to go against them on that, and unfortunately, their members suffered in horrendous ways as a result.
So what are you looking for? Like you're part of this class action suit. What is the end result that you want?
Yeah, so to speak clear, our society is organized to raise awareness and to raise funds to support the litigation. The class action suit is brought by a member of our society. The defined class is any provincial government employee who was unionized and who was affected by the mandate. Um, and what it's seeking is damages and redress for the harms that were inflicted upon tens of thousands of public servants from the coercive proof of COVID-19 vaccination mandate. So that will look very different depending on the individuals and the harms that they've personally suffered. But we as a society want to see this action go forward to ensure there's accountability and to ensure this sort of thing never happens again, because it seems to us that the government would like to establish a precedent in practice, as it were, that they can unilaterally change the terms and conditions of your employment contract or collective agreement at will, and impose very harsh and punitive sanctions on people who don't go along with having their medical privacy and bodily autonomy violated.
Have you been able to, has the union given you a chance to voice your concerns directly with them, or they just sent you a termination letter and stopped talking?
Yeah, so, and I can't speak personally to this because I was not a unionized employee myself. I was an excluded management employee. And so there is a separate legal action ongoing on behalf of a group of which I am part of non-unionized employees who were terminated pursuant to the mandate. But I am aware that there has been quite a bit of engagement between individual members of the union and the BCGU itself. The labor relations world is a very difficult world to navigate as an individual. Hence, why there are organizations like unions to help them, file grievances and go through labor arbitration and all that sort of thing. But the members of our society have experienced really nothing but stonewalling and just general frustration in dealing with their union on this issue. And it's obvious why, because the union did not want to do anything about this mandate. They could have from the beginning, but they cheered it on, and they were supportive of seeing people put on leave without pay, terminated, have their seniority revoked. People who worked for decades for the public service. And these are, supposed champions of the worker. And I refer to the leadership of the unions, people like Paul Finch, who's the president of the BCGEU, and who are really just political activists and are there to support, in this case, the ruling party, the NDP, and the employer of these people who've been affected by the mandates.
So are you working yet, or are you just waiting this out, or what's the plans for yourself personally?
Yeah, so I've had to make a number of changes in my life. I worked for the public service for 14 years in a variety of different policy roles, advising government and implementing its directions. And I don't have that opportunity available to me anymore. I live in Victoria, the capital of the province, where that's one of the main employers. So I've gone back to school and I'm studying law.
It's also puzzling too, is like, because usually when there's an injustice, and I would assume that you feel there's an injustice, that's why you filed the lawsuit, that media hasn't done more to talk to you and at least hear your side of the story. Why do you think that is?
Well, that's a great question, Jim, and it's fascinating to see, but I think it's just typical of what we see everywhere. There's a large concentration in media. There was a lot of very intense messaging by media and government from the onset of COVID to really increase fear and division, and we've seen it play out in our society with in the last few years. So there's only a few small independent voices that would like to communicate these stories, and we're appreciative of them. We try and put out our own stories, and hence why we've been recording interviews that we have with interesting people, including John Rustad. But yeah, the media has not wanted to tell our story or to even really talk to us, and it's sad.
Yeah, I mean, our job is to hold power accountable, and especially when there seems to be an injustice, that you would think that more media would reach out. We don't get any funding, so maybe that's why we reach out. We've done quite a few interviews with fire doctors and other healthcare professionals, and anybody that really wants to talk about it, because I think the best way to move forward is to find to actually open up communication and find out why, right? Because I think that's an important thing, because it's changed a lot of lives. It's changed your life, and I'm sure it's changed your family's life and a lot of other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have to continue speaking about these issues, and to seek accountability, because what we just went through over the last 4 years is very traumatic for all of us, for society, and for all of us as individuals. And if we don't deal with that trauma and properly come to terms with it, and find accountability for those who unnecessarily inflicted harms on people, then we're not going to be in a better place as a society, as a province. And so it's why we're continuing to speak out, and it's why we're supporting the lawsuits. And we invite anyone who supports medical privacy and bodily autonomy to support those lawsuits as well. So people can find our website at bcpsforfreedom.com. They can find us on social media, and let us know what your thoughts are, because there's a lot of reckoning to be had about all of this.
Yeah, Alberta seems to have found a path forward. I think like more so than BC had the mandates in place for a lot longer than almost everywhere in North America. For some reason, we've reached out to Adrian Dix multiple times to get an interview, and we've been turned down multiple times. We think Adrian Dix ran this province basically for 2.5 years. I think it'd be good if he answered some questions, and I think that would be a good start, right? So here we are in an election, and we see a lot of changes from David Eby, but we still don't have access to some of the people that are making a lot of decisions.
Yeah, well, there's a very strong political dimension to all of this, and we saw that from early on in COVID-19. There was an election called, a snap election called by John Horgan in 2020, and the NDP gained a legislative majority as a result of that. Government, of course, was very popular at that time because people were very scared and they were looking for an authority to help them through this very challenging and scary time. The NDP capitalized on that, gained a legislative majority, became very popular. And then through all of the messaging and frankly, what I regard as fear mongering about COVID 19, the division was created. And I think politically, a group of people who were critically thinking and questioning some of the policy that was being implemented became a convenient scapegoat for the politicians. And
Yeah,
so we
yeah,
saw people targeted for
yeah, I think
that.
part of that
Yeah.
had to do with the BC United going through that transition too. They didn't really offer much of an opposition at that time, and I think a lot of even some of the MLAs did speak out. Were kind of like, like quickly pushed back, and it was a tough time to raise your voice when the opposition wasn't that vocal. So
Yeah.
I think that there was an opportunist time for the NDP when they did that election to get rid of that, where they were kind of beholding to the Green Party.
Yeah, and so we've seen that continue, and we've kind of commented that this issue, this vaccine issue, vaccine mandate issue, is a sort of an ideal political wedge issue because people have very strong feelings about it, and I think unfortunately the NDP has very cynically used that issue to their political advantage. And it's why we saw the mandates last longer here than anywhere else in North America or the world, with the healthcare mandates just being lifted this summer, where they had been lifted elsewhere like 2 years ago, because it just plays to a certain portion of the population, and it really gets them energized and jazzed up. And so we've seen that again now in the election campaign, where once and again the NDP returned to the issue of vaccines, anti-vaxxer, and so forth. I think because it energizes their base. But when John Rustad spoke to us, and he spoke to us very frankly about his personal experience with the vaccine and that he regretted it, which became the headline for the NDP criticism of him, is actually a view that's pretty common amongst a lot of people. And that's why people aren't continuing to take this COVID-19 vaccine, which is interesting because it's supposed to be how it works. You take it every few months or something. So it's become so political. It's really unfortunate, not necessary. If you like the vaccine, take the vaccine. Great. You shouldn't be forced to take it. It really should be a personal thing. It protects you personally. But everything that they kind of said about it didn't really play out as they promised, and so that's why people have changed course on this.
So do you think they used your video with the interview with John Rustad as a catalyst to kind of bring back that more fear and divisiveness back to the election?
It does seem like that to me. I just don't know how effective that is going to be for them. I think it plays to a certain segment of the population. For other people, they're just like, why are you still going on about this? And it didn't like it doesn't make sense. And so I'm not sure how effective it will be, but we'll see. I mean, they feel, I think the NDP and David Eby feel that this is the issue bar none, which is why they've repeated it so many times. They've used our video. They've mischaracterized us for political advantage. And we saw it from the beginning, and they've continued. But I think the steam is kind of running out of that engine for them, and they have a lot of other problems on their hands too.
I guess it's pretty obvious that you're hoping for a change in government and a faster reconciliation to what happens, but I imagine the court case pushes forward regardless.
Yeah, and I don't know if a change of government would bring a faster reconciliation to the legal action underway. There's some important issues here, constitutional issues, employment law issues. And so that legal action may very well need to go forward. And in fact, when we asked John Rustad about that, he acknowledged that if he were to become premier. But I think mainly we just want to see accountability for government's actions, for its overreach and for its totally unjustified punishment of public sector workers. Someone needs to stand up for them. If the unions aren't going to do it, then it falls, unfortunately, on us as individuals and societies of individual public servants to come forward and to bring awareness to this.
Do you think some of the rhetoric, though, even from your side, sometimes talking about Nuremberg trials and that actually hurts your position and that gets them to kind of belittle your cause because they say, "Well, that's extreme," and and they could argue that. And do you think that it's better to talk about just the human issue of it?
Yeah, I personally don't support that kind of rhetoric, and our society has never made that kind of claim or comment at all. I understand how some people have been very upset through this whole process, and the emotions have run high, and people have made claims here and there. When we had the meeting with John Rustad, we had anyone who was a member was invited and could ask a question, totally unscripted or screened. And so a lot of interesting questions were asked. I don't necessarily agree with the sentiment behind them, but fundamentally, we're just focused on accountability, legal accountability, and public and political accountability for the actions that were taken to harm workers.
Well, we're at the 1:30 mark. I do have another live stream coming on, and I do thank you for your time, and I do hope that you find some resolution for you and your family and everybody that's connected with you and your group. And I hope the dialogue opens up where you can actually have some conversation, and hopefully the court case goes faster because they can take a long time.
Thanks, Jim. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
And thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.